that you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth while speaking for the Planning Commission. Wonderful. Cases, we have none today. Communications, we do have Athens City Council Resolution R-10-21, request to consider amending Athens City Code Title 23, zoning code, off-street parking, and Table B, off-street parking requirements. Councilmember Fall.
I'm going to look side-eyed. Okay. Hi, everybody. We've been, as the city, has been working up to this particular point in all the different work that we've been doing in the last several years with all of our various parking schemes and regulations. As you know, parking is one of those things that make strong people weak at the knees when they get in front of people. We've done work with making areas not have to walk your car by providing a 72-hour permit system. We've also worked extensively on the parking lot and our parking garage and the hours uptown to make our management of our uptown paid parking, visitor parking, well managed and able to hold the amount of traffic that's coming up there. So the last part of the parking puzzle is this off-street parking. So we've been talking about it also in the comprehensive plan through hundreds and hundreds of hours. So I'm just going to read this because it's just easier. Parking. The thought of parking makes many a bureaucrat weak-kneed. Parking, or more specifically, off-street parking, can have an outsized impact on the form and function of our communities. We have been in downtowns that are built more for cars than people. Less visual are the added hidden costs. Many times parking requirements for housing increases land needed for development. If, as in many areas, land is at a premium, so structured parking is used, this can add considerable cost to any project that's going on. And we've had that in the city. I think down at Brony's was particularly expensive. The high cost of required parking in terms of space and money restricts the resulting development. This, of course, increases the cost of any housing developed. Not only having the right size of parking requirement mostly results in too much parking or the wrong type of parking. This is inefficient use of valuable urban land, creates parking lot hellscapes, and increases in housing costs. The community impacts of the not right size parking requirements also, the community impacts of not the right size requirements also need to be addressed. Loss of walkability in our neighborhoods, increased air and water pollution, and loss of moderate and affordable housing. We see all these impacts right now in Athens. Parking requirements and enforcement is one of the few carrots that we have in the city. We don't have density numbers that we can bonus. We don't have some of the other tools that other communities use. This carrot can have help guide location and types of development in our city. Currently, the parking required is more of a stick than a carrot, and it is a very blunt stick at that. Given current land values and development costs, the result of our wrong size parking restrictions and regulations restricts land development toward the single family house on a large lot model. It is even harder to do any sort of infilling, duplex infilling, cottage development, mixed use. These outcomes is on the face exclusionary. Many communities have moved to the point that they are going towards removing R1s and having mixed use zone and housing zones because it is an exclusionary process of having strictly R1. We see that in what goes on every day, and the discussion we had about the TIF and all those. So, you know, it's here and it's real. In some areas, say Quartz Creek, the requirement for parking increases the cost of development, but also causes an overbalance of certain parking types. Think empty parking lots at night. The parking needs and parking requirements are mismatched. And based on demographics and car owning trends, it will grow mismatched. There is no real reason, apart from our regulations, that an uptown one-bedroom apartment has to have parking. This is inefficient in both capital and land use. For developers, it is ultimately cheaper to build more bedrooms or ask for a variance. The needed 1 and 2 bedroom apartments don't get developed. I'd like to point out 1 and 2 bedroom apartments would be more of the professional graduate student. They tend not to have Rager Tigers, right? That 5 bedroom sort of places have. We have an undersupply of that type of housing. I'd also like to, Donkey is a really good example. Right now, they have to find places to rent at quite a considerable cost. Most of the people in their apartments don't have a car. They have like 13 spaces, and they may rent to the people 3 spaces. So they spend time trying to get other parking for them. And that's quite a burden on one of our local businesses. So there's 3 basic approaches to right-sizing our parking. Change the number of parking spaces required per unit. This could be uniform across the city on 1 bedrooms or per bedroom. That's the current system. We could reduce the required number of spaces. We could balance them out better and stuff. I think that when basing things on bedrooms may become harder in the future because there's some court cases about that. Okay, the second part is change the total number of spaces allowed per unit. Now this is a different mindset. It's allowed per unit, it's a maximum. The other one is a minimum. A lot of communities are going no minimums and all maximums and let the market take care of it. And what they find is that housing prices tend to go down because it's decoupled with the parking price. Just like at Donkey, they've decoupled it because they're good landlords. But, you know, people who are living in places that have parking that don't have cars are subsidizing those people who have cars in those same developments. And then you can change the dimension of required spaces. You know, that's a pretty, I call that a duh approach, right? And the carrot, we talked briefly about the carrot. We don't have a lot of carrots in the city. We're developing some, like with the DRDs and those sort of things. Parking right now is our carrot. It just drives everything that's going on in this community. Our carrot is a teeny tiny little carrot, but it can grow, you know. So what basically this makes a bigger carrot is allows for flexibility. Right now it's this, or you have to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals. BZA. And that's not necessarily a very good planning approach and a city administration approach because they're not planners. They are an appeal. And if so many of the cases are going almost directly there, that could be a problem. You want to make sure that you have flexible enough regulations that that doesn't happen. You know, this can work together with all our other parking stuff that we've been doing, and the DRDs, and the TIFs, the innovation zones. This is perfect for those sort of areas and types of development. We've been talking about this for a while. From the comprehensive plan, zoning changes are needed to help shift development focus from cars to people. This can be accomplished by converting parking minimums to maximums while reducing the maximum allowed per space. Within neighborhoods, develop B1 type zoning that helps to keep businesses in the neighborhood so they're walkable. You know, this plan recommends parking changes that could be implemented as a part of a broad set of changes. We've been working all the parking. I think that the general theme of sustainability that goes through all of our comprehensive plan and all the other plans that support it, this is the right thing to do with sustainability because it reduces the amount of impervious soil, impervious surfaces. It makes the neighborhoods more walk-friendly, that is better all around. It uses our built-up land a lot more efficiently. Parking lot for cars is not in very efficient. This will help to redevelop some of those areas so that you have other things in addition to businesses like a car salesperson. So, you know, the sustainability plan also points to it because this is encouraging walking, biking, and taking public transportation. So I just want to talk a couple minutes about some of the changes. Some of the ones were the change in the size of the parking spot itself is now at a maximum of 180 square feet, which is more than a bedroom. So I think the two major areas that help to right-size the parking regulations and even out the mismatched uses is the shared facility section that has now been turned into a shared facility parking where there's a different in timing or something where you do not have to have right now in our regulations, if you use shared like that, like a shared parking lot, you have to have enough spaces for each use. So half the spaces are probably not being used for half the time. The churches have a write-up that's been regulations for the church parking lots is a good example because they're using parking that's not being used on Sunday. So that expands the model. This is a perfect example of like Salam. They have parking, they have a hard time finding parking. There are people who work during the day that leave and don't use those parkings, but Salam can't share with them because it's not the total for both uses. So this would be a change and allow for those sort of interactions and legal contracts between landowners. And this will help to keep things like the empty car parks at night syndrome. So the other thing is where, given how we want our city to grow and what it was pointed out in the comprehensive plan, there are exceptions to the B, table B, thank you. And so these exceptions are twofold. If you're in one of our transit-oriented districts, meaning where our transit service runs, then you can work with that flexibility to get your parking down to zero. You know, and so that allows for certain things like fillettes. It's probably not how you say it, but where it allows the city to have a lot more flexibility. They can do that shared parking now, and so they might be able to find 20 places or however many the city decides. And so it all works together, and that kind of builds on way. Our transit is mature enough. It's awesome. It's well-loved. Transit-oriented districts are ways of ensuring that the bus system flourishes because you have people who are moving there. They may not own a car. Car ownership in transit-oriented districts is less than in normal districts. So the second type of exceptions would be special developments. So you might be able to qualify for 75% off of the parking that we have in B. There's certain ways to be able to get those exceptions. Low-income housing tax credit project, substituting vehicle parking for bicycle parking. Designated downtown development zones, TIFs, those sort of planning tools that we use would also be part of that. Owner-occupied duplex, infill, or rental conversion. Rental conversion must have had a valid rental permit for 3 of the past 5 years. This is how to identify areas as came up in the election, that outer ring of rentals that people may really want to change because maybe they want to move back into town. So, planned unit developments, B2T uptown business zone with 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, residential tax increment financing, development with at least 50% universal units, and housing with net zero or LEED certifications. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Questions from the commission?
So, Chris, I wanted to ask, with regard, you talked about the public transit piece, and in the legislation, there's, a discussion about being within 1,500 feet or less of the transit service. And I haven't looked at anything, but would there be any area in the city that wouldn't be within 1,500 feet of the transit line? That's a quarter of a mile on either side of wherever the bus runs, and I don't know if that would include the on-demand taxi services and things, but is that really something that needs to be included, or is it pretty comprehensive? Most everywhere is going to already be within that dimension.
Well, Paul Logue mapped it out,
Okay.
and there are areas where I think what this really looks at is the infilling. And this allows for flexibility because we don't really have a huge amount of just bare space. So there may be infilling projects that can go on, like East State Street and those sort of things, of like development for aging in place, seniors and those sort of things. So that gives that flexibility for that distance. So that's normally what the best management practices showed. But, we do have smaller net area, so.
Just a question of clarification, if I could. The public transit service would be a stop, not necessarily the line itself or the route, but an actual stop.
No, it would be the line.
The line?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what the 1,500 represent is what is very popular now is called walkable parking. So, that sort of thing where people are willing to live further back if they want parking. So on theirs, but they're going to have to walk to do certain things.
Gotcha.
So what that is it's prioritizing people movement as opposed to just car movement in those situations. So.
I don't know if it's a question for Chris alone, but I think that there are parts of the city where there is a problem with no on-street parking. There are just parking places.
Right.
I think of my own front yard on Columbia Avenue, and probably to some extent maybe John's. You have, we don't have a place, if somebody throws a party, nobody throws a party anymore, but they used to. I'm a little bit concerned about that. And also, Aorta used to come up there, and it was very nice, and nothing
Yeah.
No transit now, and I can't imagine it will be.
No. Well, and what the transit-oriented district really represents is pushing how we want to develop, much more denser, where all our facilities and all our infrastructure is, and that's really the only place. And so this is the most sustainable by looking at the fact that not every 1 or 2 bedroom house, or whatever you want to call it, is going to have 2 cars, or even 1 car. We teach our freshmen and sophomores to live on campus without cars. And then they get into apartments uptown and they're all like, oh, well, there's a parking space, I guess I'll bring my car. Instead of saying, hey, if you want to bring your car, you need to find a parking space. And then that way, the people who aren't with cars, like my kids, I have 1 car in my family,
How
aren't
virtuous.
subsidizing that.
It's virtuous, but I think that in the real world, there is a problem with the students bringing cars, and it's not easily solved. I would say the fairgrounds is an ideal option, but it takes maybe $75 or more in tickets before they figure out that maybe they ought to try it. And I've said that to students when I had contact with them, and I don't think it's disappearing now. The other thing is, when I go down to the pantry, I always see a bunch of students in a car, and they have their own transit system, too. Yeah, and I don't think that's recognized well at all. The other thing that I was thinking about was spaces, and using gravel, I think, is a bad idea.
The gravel is directly from the regulations that we have now.
Yeah, I know, and I
So
think
you
it's...
want to remove gravel.
No, I think there should be an apron between it and the street so the gravel doesn't go out in the street.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And
right
that-
now, how it's written, it's much more up to code director of
Oh.
type.
Okay. And green bricks, how about green bricks? I
Right.
almost got hung for suggesting that, but I think it's a possibility.
Right.
Much better than backyard, or, because they would work, especially in the warm weather,
Right.
when
Well,
they could
and that's-
replenish.
That section has been written so that those sort of things, and emergent technology can be incorporated without going and doing a whole change.
I'm a little bit concerned about some of the things that would apply to single-family houses, and I don't know how, the right-of-way and the setback, and
Those
it's
haven't been
behind the
changed.
house.
Those haven't been changed.
I know.
Right.
But I meant if it starts, because I drove down or walked down my street, and I could see people parking exactly in incorrect ways, among other, not as bad as the front yards, but,
Well, maybe APD needs to go around and write everybody tickets.
no.
I think that if you sat down in some places to catch speeders, you would probably.
Well, I would start with speeders, because I'm afraid about the school bus, and don't get me started on that. I'm not sure also about, and I think we ought to ask Alan McMillan how it worked, because he's one of the last ones we had a case on, wasn't he redoing the GTE building, and he rented spaces? And I wondered how that worked, because if the students have their cars parked uptown, and they're the obvious rental users, how will that affect the late-night situation? I mean, you can't really say that it's a desolate area because it's all empty. It's all empty because there are signs up there. You're going to be towed if you dare park here.
Right.
You have to try that without those signs and see what happens.
Yeah. A private parking lot will still remain a private parking lot. This is something to go, when we're going forward and looking at this. I think that the trends are showing that people are having less cars, and people are sharing cars more. And, Athens is quite frankly late to the ball game here. And what we're trying to also do is, I think, emphasizing the ability to have better development occur that is more inclusive and more, economically just, is really important coming out of COVID. So.
I still don't buy the empty parking lots that aren't private property, but maybe I'm wrong on that one. no
Well,
trespassing.
the Donkey does rent places.
One spot, right?
No, they rent.
No, I mean, they are a single example, but
There's other ones up there, and if
skeptical.
the requirement for Fullett's is 40 spaces, they're never going to be able to put that on their, lot.
Yeah,
or-
for what? The 40 spaces?
Fullett's, how do you say it?
The old
Somebody help
bookstore.
me. Huh?
The old bookstore?
The old bookstore, thank you.
It's obviously a walking situation. Did you have many people come to council and talk about what was going on here?
Couple people.
Were they for it or against it?
Most people I talk to says, yes, this is obvious, and we should do it. Because Athens is late, and this is the thing to do when it comes to sustainability.
Yes, what did you say?
We're late. We're late to the game.
Oh, come
You
on,
know?
we're on top of things, don't say that.
So,
There's some spaces where it's bad, but overall.
yes, but I think now, and especially coming out of COVID and changes in how people work and stuff, we have this, remote worker prospect going forward in council with what you're doing, with the money that we voted on last time. So,
What was that?
the remote worker, yes.
Is that going to be permanent?
It's going to be grant funded from what, but who knows? I mean, I think that
Having taught.
right now we have an opportunity, and we see the problems, and this will definitely point to some solutions.
Well, I guess the final thing I will say, I promise, I bet you wish you were at home and you could just mute me. The other question is has to do with giving the code office, the code inspector, a lot of power. And I had 30 years of experience almost on council, and I saw people come and go. I mean, this one is okay, but he's only 60 years old, he's going to quit in 5 years, and then what will be hired? And who will know? I mean, it's a crapshoot. I think we need to have more of a standard, and as opposed to letting the code director do it, puts him behind the,
You mean the deciding on
I've
flammable
recorded.
surfaces?
Yeah, and I guess I'm not going to close with just this one thing. When I first came here, there was nothing going on in the upper stories, and it was a totally different place in 1971. God, I hate to even admit it. But the upper stories were vacant. They may have had some stuff there. Now there's unlimited student renters up there, and they love it. I don't know. You're fighting a losing battle almost, I wonder. I mean, other than the few people that are, I mean, there are spaces. The other thing is, I wonder if we are going to have as many students as we've had before.
Well, one of the problems that we have when looking at, like from the economic development people, is that we need professional level apartments. We 4 and 5 bedroom apartment complex.
The demand is there, though.
Well, maybe not,
Drop.
maybe because
Yeah.
numbers at school are changing, even students are changing. And I
Right.
think that we need to get 1 and 2 bedroom units there, because that's where we are lacking. Making it so that the parking and the rent is decoupled makes the rent go down, which is another thing we need to really look at when we talk about being an inclusive city and looking at environmental and economic justice, as we have been for the past year. And
The demand for multi-bedroom housing is dropping significantly,
Right.
even if the student population were to increase, which is, not likely in the
Near
immediate
first.
future, but even if it were to increase, the demand for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments will increase, because that is the preference of the age group now.
Yep.
So,
Well, we've heard a lot about millennials, so.
Well, we've heard, to kind of put an exclamation mark on what the chief was saying, is that, our engagement with landlords of late, largely due to the pandemic, and wanting to understand what was going to happen during move in and move out, was hearing that the 5 and 6 bedroom units, they're not renting because students don't want to live in a congregate setting like that anymore, that they would prefer a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom unit. The one thing in here that I also want to kind of highlight is with the 1,500 feet or less from public transit service, is we see these unused, or largely unused parking lots in a lot of the corridors that do have Athens Public Transit running through it. By and large, it's going through business zones. You know, it's B zones where most of these are, Richland Avenue, East State Street, Columbus Road.
Columbus Road, where would they park?
Well, there's a lot of building space on Columbus Road, you know, so that's yet to be determined. But if you, if you drive out East State Street
My backyard.
and look at the size of that parking lot and all the unused spaces out there, it's literally has become a truck stop.
With the,
You see a lot of
breakfast
overnight
joint?
stays of semis sitting there.
yeah,
How
not, that, I
legal
would
it is,
argue.
I don't know, but I mean,
Yeah.
clearly it is.
That is a bad use of our, you know, precious buildable land.
I don't argue against that. I think that city planner summed it up well at city council, and that
Yes,
is
he did.
basically that you can walk all the way from, what was it, Walmart, all the way up to basically 33 and not leave a parking lot as
Yeah.
you're walking through.
So they're gonna have
Okay.
buildings in the parking lots then?
Well, you could, I mean, it's unused space at this point in time when I'm looking down there.
Oh dear,
Just throwing that out there.
oh dear.
Any other questions?
No.
From the planning commission?
I would just make a comment that I think, the one thing that I like about this discussion is that I've over the years worried about the number of vacant buildings in the downtown area in Athens. I think that what is being proposed for the building at Union and Court Street is probably the best use for that property. You know, and I would hate to see that building stay empty because they can't comply with the parking regulations. And, you know, and I guess I'd like to make, you know, but more important too is, I don't just want apartments on top of the building, I want viable business space below that too, being used and not just empty. So and as I look at this, that's one of the things I would like to see in my own mind, that this will be moving in the right direction. I don't probably expect it to solve all the problems, but moving in the right direction. I think, you know, there's, you know, one of the, so I have I'm a part owner in two-bedroom apartments. And the fact that we have on-site parking makes those real attractive now when seems to be more housing available than people want to buy. So that's, you know, that's real attractive right now. And so, you know, and I think that's allowed us to keep tenants in the building.
Right.
You know.
Well, and
So-
this particular, you would still be able to do that within these regulations, because it's not, you're not being forced to do
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But, and also, one of the things, because our site and our requirements are so large, that it discourages and prohibits people who may be in a house that's a little bit too big for them, like making it into a duplex, which would also help them be able to stay and age in place and those sort of things. Over in the Near East, 3 parking spots eats up more than like 50% of anybody's yard there. And so that's exclusionary. That's another example of how our parking right now is very exclusionary. Because
But if they're old, they won't have a car.
Okay. This will come forward again as a case. So this was, again, the communication. It'll come up as a case. This The planning commission does have the opportunity to open up a public hearing. You know, if we hear from the public that do want to chime in and discuss this, and we'll just keep our ears open to see if there are a number of people, much like we had with the short-term rentals when that came forward. We had to open things up to.
I haven't gotten anybody, like, no, so. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fall. Mr. Delac, you raised your hand and swore in. Is there anything you want to add?
Just Dave, I wanted to add something to that conversation that I did a great job of.
Wonderful, thank you. I completely jumped over number 2 on our agenda, so I apologize to the Planning Commission for that. And that is disposition of the April 15th, 2021 meeting minutes, which is in your package.
Make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve.
I'll second.
And a second. Any discussion? Any amendments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes are adopted. Now we're back on track. We don't have the city planner with us today, but we do have Director Riggs from Development and Code Enforcement.
Paul's missed, but I think he's enjoying himself. I don't have a lot to report to the committee today. Just to let you know that there are a couple exciting projects that we expect to bring to you in the next couple of meetings. These will be site plan developments, and I'm looking forward to having some more development, but positive development in the city.
Great. Thank you. Opportunity for citizens to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Mr. Delac? No? Okay. Since you are the only member of the public that's here with us today. Announcements and other business. I do want to remind people, because I heard a lot of concerned citizens. We did have a flash flood last night, yesterday evening, around 5:30 to 6:30-ish, 7 o'clock. Significant. And I want to remind people that you can certainly track any emergency on Nixle, and would encourage you to go to the city's website and see how you can sign up for Nixle. It is one of our probably most used and up-to-date emergency response systems that we have in the city, so please use Nixle.
That's what I figured.
Our next meeting will be July 15th. Again, pending a quorum. If we have
It'll be okay with
3
me.
members present, I will not be here. Nancy Bain, I don't know. You said
No, I'm
you-
August. I'm gone in August.
In August, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So we're meeting, we will meet in July 15th then. Other than that, I would like to get a motion to adjourn, unless there's anybody else who has a comment. No?
Motion?
Okay. We have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.